Because I believe that our generation, one, we're more informed. Like, and the generation after us will be that much more informed. So you think about something like seatbelts. When growing up, we would ride in the back of a pickup truck. And like now, could you imagine throwing your kids in the back of a pickup truck and riding around town?
But like
That's,
an 8-year-old back there who's
yes,
so excited to be with her
yes.
older cousins, and they're all horsing around, and there's a dog there, and there's some other stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, happened all the freaking time. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was our reality.
Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. We're focused on lead dads, working moms, and how small changes at home or at work can have a big impact on their lives. Each episode promises to deliver actionable advice on some area of concern at home or at work. Short, direct, again, actionable. 5 questions, 5 answers. Today, our guest is Courtney Cecil, the Chief Executive of Working Moms Movement. She coaches working parents around managing their time and mitigating their stress. She's the go-to for the to-do. She's also the host of a great podcast called The Life Management System. A mom of 2, she and her husband live in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she is the head of culture at a Fortune 50 company. Welcome, Courtney, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Oh, what a pleasure being here with you, Paul.
I love it. I love it. All right, we started off so positive, so let's go right to the negative for question 1. What's the top mistake working parents make when managing their to-do list and their time in general?
Goodness, the top. Like if you're
But
making me boil it
you can
down,
give me like 3 or 4. I mean, it's not a comparathon. Like what are the mistakes that working parents, make that obviously could be avoided?
I feel like the single biggest mistake is that they try to do it alone. So often, particularly when you think of dual income families, we are stretched in ways that historically speaking never existed. So if you think about like fast forward even 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, most families did not have dual income in society, most families were not dual income. And then even beyond that, or in other countries, literally villages are raising the kids. The entire pods of families are staying together. For example, we had our first au pair was from Italy. And in Italy, they don't leave home. They stay at home. They grow up together. The whole family is living together. In many countries that we believe as very similar to the US, it's just not the same. So here, when many people move away from home and you're not living in the back door of your parents, we don't have the same village system that other places do. So I believe the single biggest mistake we have is trying to do it all alone. And part of that, most particularly, is this land of perfectionism we live in now
Yeah.
because the world is flatter. We are exposed to the best of the best on things like social media, on TV, and that becomes the comparison of what our measuring stick is compared against. And we're not staying in our own lane. We're comparing our lane to everybody else's, which puts that much more pressure on us to do more and do more and do more. And you just physically can't do more when there's only 24 hours in a day. You have to delegate out and learn to build your village. If you're not lucky enough to have one in your backyard, which most of us do not.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I remember, I'm a child of the 80s, and I remember my parents just cared less. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, like they didn't care about me. They just, like, I would go out and ride my bike, spoiler, without a helmet on. And I would ride it and I'd be gone. And as we all know, as the sun sets, it takes a while for your eyes to adjust. And I would come home some nights and be pitch black. And obviously, I'm still here in 2025. I made it. And I cannot imagine, our kid and we live in a way nicer neighborhood, a way better town, a way safer place. And I don't know, if my kids don't have that level and nobody does. And I think it's, how would you categorize that? What is it that are we more nervous? Are we more concerned? Are we more trying to, control the outcome and get them into something? What is it that
Yes.
allows us to be a lot
Yes.
more?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us. Okay. So how do
All
we
the
stop?
things. It's ironic that you asked this question, Paul. This is something this is day 3 of talking about this very topic. Because I believe that our generation, one, we're more informed. Like, and the generation after us will be that much more informed. So you think about something like seatbelts. When growing up, we would ride in the back of a pickup truck. And like now, could you imagine throwing your kids in the back of a pickup truck and riding around town?
But like an 8-year old back there who's
Yes,
so excited to be with her
yes.
older cousins, and they're all horsing around, and there's a dog there, and there's some other stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, happened all the freaking time. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was our reality. But guess what? Now we know that seatbelts save lives. So not only are our kids not riding around in the back of a pickup truck, but they're going to be seatbelted in all the time. And not only that, they're going to be in booster seats until they're a certain height and weight in order to be able to make the seatbelt effective. Like part of it, we just know more. But the other part of it, is I believe we are trying to compensate for things that we believe our parents' generation did not give back to us in the same way. And I'm sure the next generation will do the same thing. Like we're all trying to fix, quote unquote, fix something that
Mhm.
we believe could have been done better by the generation before. And some of that is truly generational, and some of it might just be our parents. But I always think about being part of a small group once at church that said, essentially all of us are if we're to blame something we're screwed up by, it's because of something our parents did. Our parents were also just doing the best job they could do, just
Right.
like we're doing the best job we could possibly do with our kids. But generationally, we are inspired by some a gap
Mhm.
that we believe the generation before us had. Now, I think the biggest theme for our generation of parenting is really leaning into EQ. Like most of us, and this is a broad brush statement, it is certainly not it's not intended to be about everybody, but many people in the generation of parents now are were terrified growing up to have real honest conversations with their parents
Yeah.
because it was more ironclad parenting. I mean, we got the belt, I got the soap in the mouth, I got the wooden spoon over my knuckles. Like it was just the generation that we were raised in. Now I can't imagine anybody in my close circle
Right.
using the same type of tactics to parent. But also, we are trying to create a space where our kids are a lot more open with us and how they talk to us and what what part of their lives they expose us to and that sort of thing, because that's not the relationship that many of us had with our parents. And again, that is a broad brush statement. That is not everybody, but I think that creates a societal norm for this generation of parents. And there's probably something that we're doing wrong too that our kids will say when they get older, like, you know what, my parents did this and it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, when my kids get older, they're like, I'm not gonna have a dialogue with my children. I'm gonna go back to like one way. No, yeah, because it's you're right. Like the conversations that we have at the dinner table, the 7-year-old is sort of a bystander, but the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old, they challenge us, and it's robust, and sometimes they're right, but I also think like it's teaching them a lesson when mom and dad can say, you know what? It's a good point. You're right. I hadn't thought of it that way. Or you know what? I made a mistake. I'm wrong. It's giving them something a little bit more.
Yeah, I really, really, really fully believe in the vulnerability of owning your accountability, owning your mistakes, that sort of thing, not only from my day job and culture, but also from a parenting perspective. I think it's absolutely critical that we demonstrate that level of vulnerability and saying, you know what, I'm not perfect either. And that is something I know most of my clients, the working mom clients, all have perfectionist tendencies. It's
Mhm.
something that I certainly suffer with, and it's something I'm already seeing in my youngest. Like just last week, he got in trouble and he is truly like the straight A rule follower, has high standards, but he got in trouble for doodling on the back of a seat on the bus on the way home. And he was mortified, crying, like beside himself because of it. So then we spent the whole weekend unpacking some of the mistakes I made when I was a child to be like, listen, I also have very high standards for myself. And let me tell you some of the stories that I had or that I did or I was responsible for. But you know, so part of that just humanizes you as a
Right.
person, and but it also demonstrates that we're not perfect and we're going to make mistakes. And I love the psychological safety, Paul, that you are creating at the around the dinner table with your kids to be able to keep pushing the boundaries and ask questions and be provocative and that level of integrity that you're able to foster just as a result of the culture you're creating around the dinner table. That's pretty neat.
All right, question two, similar question. That first question more of the micro. This is more the macro nature of life. So the second question is, what are the common mistakes that working parents make around managing the totality of everything, managing that whole, work life equation, not just the kids and what needs to be done and the need for help in a village, but that whole, work and life and everything that goes into it. What are some of the common mistakes they make there?
So are you asking specifically to the impact that it has on their family or the impact that it has on the workforce? Because those are two very different questions when you think about macro.
I was asking from the individual's point of view, but I'd love for you to answer it how you want. These are always open ended questions. So if you want to talk more of what the company can do to help the individual, that would be wonderful. Or answer them both.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's start with the company then. So, one of the things that I believe the company can do to help the individual is setting standard working hours that are common core the to the uh to the employees. Because one of the things when I think about modern day working society, our world right now is very different than it was, gosh, even before the pandemic. And what I mean
Of
by
course.
that is before the pandemic, you think about the amount of times you're hopping on an airplane to go to a meeting. Well, all of a sudden, when you're doing something like that, or when you're having to have defined in-person meetings because you need to be face to face for certain topics and relationship building or whatever it may be, you are inherently creating buffers in your day. You are taking time to travel. You are taking time to transition between meeting one and meeting two because I mean, that was just the nature of how you had to get work done. Fast forward to today, what do we do? Back to back to back to
Yeah.
back to back stack calls because we do have this gift, like you and I have right now, of leveraging video conferencing in a way that never existed pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
But fast forward to now, when that's the world that you live in, there is no breathing room in the workplace for you to be able to keep your head above water, essentially, let alone create the space for heaven forbid you have a dentist appointment that you need to fit in or whatever it may be. So I think having core hours to just that their employees need to get work done is critical to creating the space for parents to stay in the workforce, for them to feel like it's sustainable.
When you mean core hours, do you mean a set number of hours, or do you mean a set number of hours synchronously? And I asked this question,
Synchronous.
right? Okay, because one of the things we talk about at the company dads, we talk about people who can opt into care shifts, and what a care shift is you agree to a certain number of hours, say 9:30 to 3:30, you'll be working, synchronously, which doesn't mean you'll only work 6 hours a day. It means you'll do other stuff at other times. Is that what you're sort of aiming for? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting because I'm going out to visit a client on Friday in Boston, and I live outside of New York City, and I'm going to have a 3 hour train ride, and I am so looking forward to the train ride up and back because I already have some sort of deep thinking work that I'm going to do on the way up, and some deep thinking work that I'm going to do on the way back because I know that, as you said, it won't be back to back to back because too often I think during our waking hours, like, oh boy, I could get another meeting in. Um, when you think about what managers can do in helping people manage this equation of life, um, are any managers sort of saying, why don't you put in 20 minutes between meetings or 15 minutes between meetings? Because that's what we used to have. We used to walk
Mhm.
to a meeting when I was working in New York City. You'd walk to a meeting, so you get outside, and why is that good? It's not the exercise that's good, but it's the time to think. It's the time for your brain to sort of wander a bit and come up with a thought, as opposed to, okay, on the hour, I got another call. I got to keep going. So, are any of them building in that buffer in this?
Yes, and we absolutely ignore it, Paul. So
Yeah.
everybody builds in that buffer and nobody actually holds to it. As an example, a lot of my team will try to have 25-minute meetings. So everybody has a 5-minute buffer for even a one function break. That, of course, gets just demolished. What I try to do is institute 45-minute meetings. But what happens there is people will see that there's a 15-minute break and they'll be like, oh, if it's a 45-minute meeting, then she can get everything she needs in that half hour. She doesn't need the 45 minutes. So they'll schedule over. It is truly, I mean, the expectations in corporate America are so intense right now because everything is moving astronomically faster than it did even 5 years ago. So I think that's part of it is just to keep up with your competition and to keep up with the pace of the economy and the changing of the world. In corporate, you're just moving that fast.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely exhausting, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that managers can do. While realistically, I have not seen a successful company implement shorter meetings and actually be able to create that breathing room. What I have found is the effectiveness of managers leading through it themselves, where they're not putting themselves on camera or they are saying, guys, I have to leave because I have my dentist appointment or my kid has a dentist appointment, or that they're encouraging and premeditating in advance this catch-up call that we're having as a team every week. That's a walking call. That is a call where all of us are going to be off camera and we're going to be outside spending that hour together, but we're going to spend it on a walk to be able to get away from our desk and at least be able to get in steps. So there are things that managers can do to lead through it, but most of them, unfortunately, don't take the time to create space to do that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of shame on them. But I think that that is absolutely critical to not just the engagement and sustainability of careers, but humanizing the experience of the workforce now and in a ways that I feel like we're very quickly getting away from. And the pandemic, there was a very vulnerable environment where you're seeing people's lives happen behind you on screen. And now all of a sudden with a strict and fast enforcement of return to office, we have quickly gotten away from that. And we're still relaxed in some ways. Like I get to wear jeans now. I have suits in my closet that will probably never be worn again. And I'm fine with that. So there are some good things that we have still gotten from it,
Yeah.
but it's amazing how quickly we're forgetting that humanization that happened during the pandemic. And that's just unfortunate.
Love it. We're going to ping pong back and forth between work and home. So the third question is, what do you think the secret is to creating a more equitable household where, mom and dad and the kids are all pitching in together and one person isn't carrying all the mental load?
I think that first of all, I love this question because that is one of the problem areas that many of my clients have is in a world of dual income families where our activity levels have increased. I mean, I remember I had one activity essentially before middle school maybe when
Yeah.
competitive sports really started picking up. But now I'll try to see a friend and they're like, sorry, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like we have something 6 of the 7 days a week. It's exhausting. So life just looks different and it looks faster and it's far more intense than I experienced certainly growing up and many of my peers did. So, in order to sustain that, one, as I talked about earlier, I think you really need to build your village, whatever that
Yeah.
means, like learn to delegate both at work and at home. And part of delegating is certainly to your kids. A lot of people have tendencies to feel like they need to do things themselves as opposed to sharing the load with their kids. Like the
Mhm.
cleaning lady's coming up, oh, I'll pick up after them. Or,
I
oh,
never
I'll
do that. It drives me crazy when I hear my neighbors, they clean before the cleaning person comes. I'm like, why are you paying the cleaning person to come? Like, because you don't want the cleaning person to think that your house is dirty? Like, why else would the cleaning person be coming? Come on. I'm the anti pre-clean before the cleaning
Are
person.
you? I am not. I'm a cleaner, but it's because
No.
of the clutter. I hate clutter, Paul. So what I'm able to use it for is the excuse to teach my boys like this is how you do things. So I use it as a pinch point because I've got boys and I'll be damned if 20 years from now they're my future daughter-in-laws aren't like, what did she do? Did she not teach them anything? But I think that so often we have tendencies to overpronate and doing things for our kids
Yep.
because we want them to stay little because it's easier. That's a common excuse because it is certainly easier. Delegating is hard. Learning to delegate is hard. But what I fear is that by doing that, we are not enabling their independence. And I think back to, gosh, my childhood, I was weed eating the yard, I was mowing the yard, I was doing my parents' sheets and making their bed every Saturday, like things like that, that I never ask of my boys. The least I can do is ask them to pitch in and unloading the dishwasher and things like that. So part of it is learning to delegate. But I think the single biggest thing that can make a difference is clear delineation of responsibilities. So when you and your partner don't know who owns what, who's on first base for anything at any point in time, then you're going to be tripping over each other. And I'm all about helping people build calculated, intentional decisions and the way that they do life. And part of that is the ownership of the tasks at home. Because when you get clear on that, all of a sudden you know how you can flex for yourself or how you can flex for your work in ways that you otherwise wouldn't, because you know you can trust your partner to do that other thing because this is your responsibility. So it just gives you more agency in how you do your life, but in a way that serves the entire family.
Awesome. Question 4, going from work to home to now the social, presuming, both parents are married, they're working, you got to set up boundaries. They want to have some time either for themselves or for each other together. We often forget that the person we had kids with is somebody we fell in love with first and had a lot of fun with before we had kids, and had more responsibilities. What recommendations do you give to sort of dual income couples so that they can carve out either time for themselves to do whatever their hobby is, or to go out, the dinner every couple weeks, long weekend, quarterly. How do you help them give themselves permission to care for themselves?
Gosh, it's funny you say that because just yesterday I kicked off with a new client. And I told her the way that I do it, when I kick off, as we go through their entire routine, I have a series of questions, but I'm asking about what does their end-to-end week look like, essentially over a 2-week period. And never once did I hear her talking about something that she's doing for herself. So you better believe by the end of that call, when I'm giving her the homework to go into the next
Yeah.
week, I'm saying by the end of our 6 months together, I I never want to hear again you going through your week in ways that you're not talking about something that's for you. So part of it is we just live so selflessly for our kids. I mean, parents are very selfless individuals. We want to give all of ourselves to them, but we tend to get it's not that most of us don't want time to ourselves or don't want time to reconnect with our spouse. We're just not intentional about creating it. So my shtick and what I will probably have written on my grave is around intentionality. Because when you're intentional, all of a sudden you have time to do things that you never realized you did before. So and in fact, yesterday during my kickoff call with this client, she kept using the word frittering away time. And I was like, I like that because it perfectly synthesizes what people tend to do is we have more time than we realize we have, but we're not, because we're not intentional with it, we're not tackling our highest and best use items. We're not putting first things first. We're not creating time for ourselves or our spouse because you just find yourself in the moment and it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to bumble around a little bit until it's time for bed. But when you're very intentional and calculated with scheduling how you spend your time, all of a sudden you have time you didn't realize you had. And part of doing that and the exercise that I take my clients through is figure out what you value first. So when you figure out what you value first, then it informs what you prioritize. Prioritize spending your all of your resources on actually your time, your money, and your energy. And when you prioritize, it informs how you spend your time. And if your marriage is one of those, or self-care like working out, or your relationships with your friends or something of that nature is one of those, all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, I have to figure out how to make this happen. So I believe everything goes back to what you value. And because it does inform those priorities, but most especially when you figure out what you prioritize, figure out how to make that stuff happen. Like create the space on your calendar to make it happen. I promise you probably got some, but you need to look further out than just the day that you're in right now. That's just not going to happen.
I love this. Like you're so intentional. That's going to be on your tombstone. I kind of fast forwarded down like Gary Larson type rabbit hole of like, she died on Monday early. It made it the most convenient for everything to have a service on Friday. Nobody was inconvenienced. Like how intentional is she? All right, we're coming to the end here. This is a quick last question. Question Five. We've touched on home, work, kids, self-care, everything here. And at the end of it, there's a lot and it's overwhelming. So, or can be overwhelming. We've got to sort of fight the overwhelm. So, what are your top three tips to avoid overwhelm and get past the constant treadmill of to-do list?
Oh, three. That's a very specific request.
Or two or five. I
Okay.
don't know. I'm trying to be intentional. I'm being
You
intentional.
are.
I didn't want to say, what are your top tips, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the two that automatically come to mind, one is relaxing our standards. We have, again, going back to where we started earlier, we have very high expectations for what our life looks like. And some of that is not written by us, it's written by our neighbors and our coworkers and society and entertainment. And we are just not staying focused on what's true to us and what it is that we value. And that level of exposure that you have to other people inherently puts pressure on ourselves to be something that we're not or we don't care about. So part of it is just being really true to what you want so that you know where you can relax your standards and what does and doesn't matter. So, as an example, my husband, Richard, values time to himself every single night. Like he needs that to
So do
him.
I. So do
Yeah.
I. I'm
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, me and
So
Richard are the same. Yeah.
when you know that, and I think it's a dude thing, by the way, like most
I'm an
guys,
only child. I think it's an only child thing, but maybe it's a dude thing. I'm an only child. So, like, having time for my brain to just decompress, that's super important to me.
yeah, well, that's very much Richard. Whereas meanwhile, like I'm still listening to audiobooks at two times the speed just before I turn out the lights. Like, like I don't know. I can take all the stimulation and I don't get overstimulated. But because he knows he needs that, there are many times that his to-do list, he's pushing off and pushing off and pushing off because he knows he needs to prioritize that. I'm less like that. I definitely have more of a high I have a harder time feeling settled if my to-do list isn't done. But at the same time, because I know I value certain things, I put those in first and work everything else in around
Right.
it.
Right.
And so I really am good at putting first things first. But what happens when you do that is the only way to fit those things in is you have to relax your standards. You have to let go of control. You have to just be at peace with not being perfect. And sometimes that perfectionism is something like leaving the laundry unfolded on your floor for 3 days because you have to choose between
Sure.
something you value, like putting your kids down to bed, or getting a good night's rest, or you have to value spending the time doing the laundry.
Yep.
So some of it's stuff like that, but oftentimes it's you get before being a parent, you have control over more of your ecosystem. You have control over more of your.
Understatement of the day right there.
Oh my gosh. Like I often refer, maybe you have a better experience with girls, but I call my boys animals. Like they're absolute animals. But part of it is in the way they wrestle and that sort of thing. And the other part is just the amount of mess and clutter and
Yeah.
I don't know, they're like little tornadoes. So part of being a parent, I think, is learning to relax your standards. You have to in certain ways. And as you probably experienced when you added your second, your ability to control your environment with one looks a lot
Yeah.
different than when you add a second. And I can't even imagine your life with a third. And it
You give
probably,
up. You give up when you have three. Yeah.
but that's it. Like you got to relax your standards. Like you can't be so perfect. So that's one of the biggest things. And the other is around building the muscle of delegation.
I
That
like that
is
phrase. I like that phrase. Yeah.
It's a muscle that needs built. It's very uncomfortable. And I'm working with several of my clients on this now, both at work and at home, because when it's kind of like when you first become a manager. And when you do, you're used to being able to have, like, you know that you can trust yourself to do the good job. You know that you have a certain level of standards that are going to be met, but you have to figure out how to leverage down in order to take on this new responsibility
Mm.
that you have at work. And it is not easy. It's something you get better and better and better at, and that you kind of sometimes have to slow roll yourself into. But it is a critical life skill for you to be able to balance it all, both at work and at home. And the later we get into our lives, the more responsibility we have. Of course, it's a little bit of a bell curve, but many parents that are probably listening to us, Paul, haven't hit the top of that bell curve yet, or they are at the very top of that bell curve. So, in order for you to maintain the level of responsibility that you have, which includes caring for yourself and your marriage and your kids and your work and whatever it may be, you have to learn to delegate. So, building the muscle and getting more comfortable with that, both at work and at home, is really important and critical to your balance.
Courtney Cecil, Chief Executive of Working Moms Movement. Thank you for being my guest today on the Company of Dads podcast.
It has been my absolute pleasure, Paul. I'm grateful for you, grateful for that connection, and I'm looking forward to 20 years from now when something like the Company of Dads and Working Moms Movement no longer exists.
That's right, where people just,
Because
yeah,
we
yeah.
are, we have broken down all of these walls.
I love it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Company of Dads podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in week after week. Just want to use this moment here to thank the people who make it possible. Number one, of course, Helder Mira, who is our podcast editor. We also have Skip Cherryholmes, who many of you know from the Lead Dad Diaries. He's taken over our social media. Terry Brennan is helping us with our audience development, and Emily Servin is there each and every day helping with the web development. I can't do any of this without an amazing board of advisors. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who help, and I want to say thank you to everyone who listens, and hopefully you'll tune in again next week. Thanks so much.